chapter of IEEE. So I'm very happy to be here for this event, recognizing one of the landmark technologies that came out of the Rochester area, just specifically the portable digital camera that was invented here in Kodak. It takes a lot to recognize milestones with the IEEE, which are large, ground-shifting technologies that have gone through the years, at least 25 years, before they can be recognized for their impact to society. Among the crowd that's here, I'm on the younger end that grew up more with the digital camera. So my perspective on it is very different. For me, it was a technology that was there early on in high school, into college, and now it's ubiquitous with everyone's cell phone with a digital camera or several built into it. And this all started back in the late 70s with inventions here at Kodak. So to kick off our event, discussing this IEEE milestone, I'd like to introduce Dr. Greg Godowski. That's the Region 1 Director for IEEE.
We have digital cameras. There's no problem.
Need another invention, the microphone that stays in.
Space.
Hey, thank you. So my name is Greg Godowski. I'm the Region 1 Director. IEEE, representing all of the Northeast Coast, one of the largest regions in all of and on behalf of the Board of Directors and Ray Liu, we wish to help you celebrate this historic milestone here in Rochester. And for me personally, when I was chair of the Rochester section a long time ago, we had Steve Sasson give a talk on the digital camera, and it was one of the most memorable, impactful events for me, I think, that I ever had here in the section that I helped organize. And it's something that I have never, ever forgotten. And, you know, so I'm really thrilled that that a number of the people in the audience, Bill Folks, Mark Schrader, and my good friend Ron here helped generate the application for the milestone, which will include a plaque that will be dedicated here shortly. You know, so many fond memories of this. I think back, there are only 3 historic milestones here in Rochester, and this being only the 3rd. And Region 1 itself has the most milestones of any region in IEEE. So for Rochester to finally pull out number 3 is really a remarkable thing. And I'd like to first thank the individuals that helped to get the application through the process, which was not easy, by the way. So thank you. I tried to kind of think of the impact of the camera, the digital camera in particular, to all of us. But I think probably the easiest thing that we can all recognize today is that 2 years ago, COVID hit all of the world, and the world relied on digital communication. They relied on Zoom of all things, and that wouldn't have been possible without the invention here in Rochester. So if anything saved us through the pandemic, the ability to communicate and the ability to utilize digital technology was really a remarkable achievement that led us to be able to do that over the last 2 years. So the next time you use Zoom, which will probably be tomorrow or tonight, remember that that was all possible because of an invention here in Rochester. So I'm going to celebrate by taking a picture. I learned this trick from some people in the region, but we wouldn't have been able to do that many years ago. And I think of all the pictures that my wife and I take when we're on trips or at stores, we just want to save things on our phone. And how many things I do with my digital camera now that I could not have done the former technology that relied on film. So it's really notable what was achieved. And I think, you know, as an academic, the thing that strikes me the most about this technology was not its impact, but how it was invented and how it came to be. And for me, you know, as an academic, I've always never have forgotten Steve's presentation where he conveyed that he was only just out of college, probably 1 or 2 years out of his undergraduate degree at RPM. I want to make sure I had that one right. So, you know, a few years out, imagine all of us inventing probably, I think arguably the technology of our generation, right? And doing it when you're only 22, 23 years old. To me, that is a story I tell my students, my new students, every single year, that if you think you can't invent something, you are completely wrong, because then I hold up my camera and I say, the person who invented this was your age when they made that invention. Now, there were lots of challenges, as we all know, for getting that technology out. But just the fact that a young individual was able to invent that technology and it later became probably the most well-recognized invention of our time is something that we really should all celebrate. And so I thank the group for having me here today and give that short presentation. But please help us all celebrate, you know, one of Rochester's greatest inventions. There are many, but this is certainly one that truly needed to be recognized. I'm so glad that it's finally done. Oh, we're going to switch the table.
Yeah.
Look, anyone.
Our next speaker discussing their work and contribution to the camera prototype be Ken Kurylski.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I've been an IEEE member since 1978 as a student. And I started at Kodak in 1980 in physics, working on digital imaging, and retired in 2012 as the chief scientist and research fellow for digital photography. So I've seen, although I was not here at Kodak, Steve started working as digital camera prototype. I've seen evolution of first digital cameras and then camera phones. And I did actually, for the first time, publicly describe the camera in a paper I gave in 2000, Switzerland. So that was the first time it was actually publicly described. It's really an honor to tell you about this Kodak digital camera prototype. And I want to make sure that at some point after we're finished here, you all know that it's right back there. So please make sure that you go and take a look. A number of people can answer questions. Some who know more about it than I do. But It's an honor to talk about this prototype. It is, as will be mentioned on the plaque, the world's first portable battery-operated digital still camera. It was designed by Steve Sasson, who was a young electrical engineer from Brooklyn. He had gotten his master's degree from IEEE and had been in Kodak only a relatively short time. And he was asked by his supervisor, Gary Lloyd, to make an electronic camera using a CCD image sensor. That was the assignment. And Steve was the one who decided that the camera should record images digitally. And he decided that it would record images onto a standard Philips digital cassette. So this is, some of you may be familiar with this. This actually happens to be an audio cassette. I'm not sure what songs are on it, but this could also record images. There were data recorders that would digital data. So this is what was actually used. Steve took the lens and the viewfinder and the exposure control out of a Kodak 8mm movie camera that was being sold at the time. So we already had the lens and the optics. He used 16 AA batteries in order to make the device portable. I can imagine he went through a lot of batteries in the course of taking pictures with that camera. Behind the lens was a new monochrome charge coupled device that was made by Fairchild Semiconductor. It was commercialized and was being sold as a component in 1974. This sensor, the CCD, had 10,000 pixels, which is 1/100th of a megapixel. So think about that in terms of how digital imaging has advanced since the 1970s. It turns out at Kodak Research Labs, another group had also purchased this sensor, and they were already demonstrating the world's first color CCD camera. Rather than building a portable digital camera, they were focused on a color camera that would be part of a camcorder. And I'll be giving a talk later that talks about a lot of technologies, but I'll describe that. So they overlaid a color mosaic filter on top of this Fairchild device in order to get a color image. Now, Steve's prototype, which you'll see in the back, he designed a 4-bit A to D converter, and built using a discrete resistor string, 15 voltage comparators in order to get this 4-bit digital signal. And since there was no digital image compression, each image had 5,000 bytes of data. Now, this tape could only record about 300 bytes per second. So it took over 20 seconds to record each image onto the tape. But the problem Steve solved was that the CCD had to be read out in a fraction of a second. Because what happens is that dark curve builds up over time, and in 20 seconds it would completely swamp the signal from the sensor. So he designed a frame memory, and this frame memory would quickly store the image from the CCD sensor after A to D conversion, and then it would be slowly read out over the next 20 seconds in order to write that data onto the tape. And in 1978, Lloyd and Sasson received a patent for Kodak on this invention. Now, the frame memory that Steve built required 12 DRAM chips. Each of those chips stored slightly more than 4,000 bits of data. So again, imagine how technology has advanced. Today, one DRAM chip can store easily 24 gigabits or 500,000 photos. So instead of this tape, which could only store 30 photos, you could store 500,000 photos in one current DRAM chip. Now the camera recorded black and white photos onto this cassette. And the tape was inserted into a playback unit so that you could show the photos on a TV screen. since there was no display or video output on the camera. About 10 years later, Kodak invented organic LEDs, which now display images on smartphones as well as giant flat panel TVs. And we're really honored to have the inventor, Ching Tang, of organic LEDs here. It was a surprise and a very pleasant surprise. So this is another technology that's become very valuable for digital photography that was pioneered here. Now, the first prototype camera and the playback unit were built by Jim Schickler, who's Steve's chief technician. Jim is here, and I encourage you to come and talk to him later because he knows much more about how this really came to be than I do. And the first picture was taken of Joy, who was also part of Steve's department. And she may have some other stories to tell. So she may have some really good stories about Steve Sasson, just saying. But I encourage you both to talk to both of them after the formal presentation. Now, I should mention that Jim went on to earn his master's degree in electrical engineering at RIT. And in the early 90s, he had this crazy idea of combining a digital camera and a mobile phone together in a single unit. But that's a story for Jim to tell, and a story for another. Yet another example. Ideas that came from Kodak. Jim and Steve worked in the Kodak apparatus division, which was responsible for film cameras. And the sad part of the story is that Steve says his top managers were convinced that nobody would ever want to look at pictures on a television set. And so unfortunately, that division never commercialized digital cameras. But Kodak had other divisions, not just that division. And some of the other divisions embraced digital imaging. And you can see some of the work that they've done here as well. They designed, built, and sold world-class color megapixel CCD sensors. They invented and sold the first digital SLR cameras that became sort of the market leaders for a decade. And they designed the world's first consumer megapixel cameras. And I personally was fortunate to be part of this effort. It's good to see some colleagues from years ago here that were also participating. So the plaque that Terry's going to unveil here in a little bit recognizes the work of a small Kodak group that includes Steve Sasson and Jim Schickler and Gary. But it also implicitly recognizes many other talented Kodak electrical engineers and scientists who spent more than 3 decades working to develop digital photography. And the digital technologies and the products we developed here at Kodak have revolutionized not just photography, as I said earlier, really revolutionized the way we communicate. So thank you all for coming, and I'm honored to be able to work with my colleagues.
Presenter will be Terry Tabor, Chief Technology Officer and Vice President.
Still working? I think so.
Good. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Terry Tabors, as Eric said, CTO and VP at Kodak, and also President of the Advanced Materials and Chemicals Business Groups, most of which occupy Kodak's participation in this manufacturing facility here in Rochester. And I mentioned some of the threads of invention and innovation. And this evening, I'm going to be talking about those threads that start from the digital camera and extend down to the present. And some of the growing businesses that Kodak is in today, we can trace back to these interdisciplinary efforts of engineers and scientists at Kodak that go back decades. And yet they're still producing fruit for our customers and for this region and for the company. First, let me extend greetings to all of you from Jim Continenza, our CEO and executive chairman. He sends his greetings and his thanks as well. I also want to extend my thanks to the IEEE local section, to the board, to all the folks who pioneered and steered this through the application process. It is quite an honor, and it's really a privilege to stand up here and talk about this on behalf of Kodak, because it's the work, as you heard, it's the work of Steve and his team that made this happen. But it really represents the invention and the innovation, the creativity and the dedication of engineers and scientists to create and have the passion to bring it to practice, to make something that is significant. And that happens time and time again. And we've experienced it quite a bit at Kodak. You can see some of that, in these displays here at the Kodak Center. But I also have to extend the thanks to the IEEE for letting a synthetic organic chemist from Caltech speak in front of IEEE group. Yeah, not intimidated, but I am appreciative. So, I started Kodak in 1980 as well. So my career has overlapped with Steve for about 25 years. In fact, about every couple of months, a small group of us, Steve included, meet for lunch. So I keep in touch with Steve even today. And I know he's probably sent his greetings in a number of ways and has said that he couldn't be here today for this event, but he had a previous commitment plan. But if you've met Steve and you know Steve, it's always a pleasure to talk with him. One of the things that he and I talked about, even though we had different backgrounds in terms of sciences and engineering and different roles at Kodak, the real mixing pot of Kodak in the 70s and 80s brought these disciplines together, and we shared a lot of ideas about a lot of things. And that's a healthy environment. And one of the things that Steve and I talked about often, and we still actually talk about today, is vision. And vision is really important for a number of reasons. But think about it, 1975, here's an individual recently out of college, told to make an electronic camera. He does it successfully. And his first response is, this isn't going to go anywhere. But he had a vision, he had a passion to continue to pursue that and find a pathway. And that's an important aspect of invention and innovation that we sometimes forget about, is that oftentimes you have inventors who don't necessarily have the vision of where it can lead. Others do. In the case of Steve and the recognition around this digital camera, he was both. He was an inventor and he was a visionary. And particularly think about disruptive technologies, disruptive products, revolutionary changes in the landscape of our society. Oftentimes, the disruptive technologies and products are not recognized when they're invented. And even when they are, customers say, what do I need that for? And once it starts to catch hold, even then, think about how long it takes for these disruptive technologies to actually come into the mainstream. And while it's moving from lab to practice to mainstream, how many other streams of invention and innovation, all that was mentioned earlier, come into play to make that even stronger as a disruptive play? And so, as the professor shared earlier, this is a significant milestone because it did change our society in so many ways. Digital technologies were not just part of photography, but there was a whole analog to digital shift. And so the recognition of that in this digital camera prototype and Steve's inventiveness and his vision for what it could mean for society later on. Actually, this evening I'll share a section from the technical report from 1977, and you can get an idea of how he was thinking about what it might look like. It isn't 100% perfect, right? Visionaries are never exactly right, but having a vision for where things are headed and what they can do is very, very important. You know, the other thing that Steve and I talk about is things don't happen in a vacuum. And what we mean by that is it takes a team. That's already been highlighted. And effective leaders, effective developers, effective scientists and engineers learn collaborative efforts, interdisciplinary discussion, and debate is extremely useful for advancing the state of science and the state of engineering. And you know, one of the benefits that I've had in my career at Kodak, which now spans 42 years, still going, is having this melting pot of disciplines, scientists, engineers, manufacturers, marketers, all the functions. And the collaborative environment doesn't create itself. It's leaders that make that happen. And Steve was the embodiment of that as well. So we're celebrating the digital camera. We're celebrating Steve Sasson. And certainly the technology behind the digital camera, what it was then and what it is now, that's pretty visible. You know, as an engineer, as a scientist, or just as an individual who's curious, you can tear that apart. You can find out about it. You can Google it. You can learn a lot. What you can't learn is the passion and the time and the sweat and the collaboration that it took to go from that lab prototype to something that changed society. And so on behalf of Kodak, it is an honor and a privilege to accept this award, this plaque from IEEE. Steve is a deserving recipient, more importantly, recognizing digital technology in this way and what it represents to society today is very deserving of that. And so it is a privilege to accept that and to thank you again for this recognition, for being here today, for all those who are here who participated, all the familiar Kodak faces that I've seen as I walked in. Thank you for being here, but also thank you for what you did when you were part of Kodak. You built a foundation that keeps the company still going, and I can say in the last 2 years, growing today. Without that foundation, that would have never happened. We're now 10 years out of bankruptcy. We're building on the foundation, on the shoulders of giants of the past. So thank you for this recognition. I'm very proud on behalf of Kodak to accept it. And I guess I now have the honor of pulling the veil off of the plaque, and hopefully the veil comes off and not the plaque. See the text. IEEE Milestone, first handheld solid-state still camera, 1975. A self-contained portable digital camera was invented at an Eastman Kodak Company laboratory. It used movie camera optics, a charge-coupled device as an electronic light sensor, a temporary buffer of random access memory, and image storage on a digital cassette. Subsequent commercial digital cameras using flash memory storage revolutionized how images are captured, processed, and shared, creating opportunities in commerce, education, and global communication. And as we heard earlier, global communication, right? The last 2 years, absolutely a godsend in how we survived through a pandemic. So thank you again on behalf of Kodak.
Thank you all very much for coming. Milestone event. Thank you very much for the team in Rochester, Ron, Bill, and Mark that worked tirelessly on this application to get this milestone technology recognized by the IEEE. And we have some refreshments around the corner for everyone to enjoy and I guess reminisce and hear some stories of the early days of the digital camera.
Terry's already gone.